8 years. It has been 8 years that this movie has been in the works. I was in college when the first Five Nights at Freddy's game came out, and I am now married, and just yesterday celebrated my 30th birthday. To say that I have spent almost a third of my life waiting on this movie is a strange experience. But here we are. And I am here to give you my thoughts as a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's who has been here since the original Chipper and Sons Lumber Company review that set all this off, and how I think it stacks up. And hey, why dance around the issue? My thoughts as a fan is that I was pleased with the movie. I thought it was exactly what it needed to be, and that is a fun, campy story about killer animatronics. If you are somebody who's never really been into Five Nights at Freddy's, and you're wondering whether or not this is going to be the thing that finally converts you into the fandom, that's not really something I could say one way or the other. The thing that I get from watching this movie is that this is a fan film in every sense of the phrase. It is a film that is made by fans, for fans. And I don't think it is impossible for somebody who has never been down with Five Nights at Freddy's to watch this and have a good time, but I think it is more likely for you to enjoy it if you are already a fan. And this video isn't going to be a review so much as just a discussion about my thoughts on the movie. And to that end, it's going to be filled with spoilers. So again, if you're watching this trying to figure out if the movie is worth your time, just go for it. Give it a watch. It is under 2 hours, and I think there are a lot worse ways you could spend that time. So go watch the movie if you haven't already, and then come back and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Also, watch this video again when you do come back, because I need the views desperately. So, with that said, spoilers begin now. So yes, as I said earlier, this is a fan film in every conceivable way, and that begins right at the beginning with the first cameo that we get from MatPat, which is something I think everybody was expecting. Love him or hate him, MatPat has been a major figure in the Five Nights at Freddy's community for almost as long as the community's been around. And I think that it would have been remiss to make a movie that is a celebration of the franchise and the fandom and to not include him. And I think his cameo was actually completely non-intrusive. I thought it was cute. I actually didn't recognize his voice at first, and then like when it pans over to show him, I literally said out loud when we were watching at home, I said out loud, "You motherfuckers!" But I thought it was completely non-intrusive. I feel like it doesn't interrupt the pacing of the movie at all, and I think the way that they let him work the "it's just a theory" line in was cute. Again, it doesn't feel like the movie is stopping to have the MatPat cameo. And apparently, if you watch his video that he put out talking about his experiences behind the scenes, Scott himself actually originally wrote the line to be a lot more intrusive, and I think they made the right call, just making it a cute little reference that doesn't, drag things down. And speaking of cameos, the Corey Kenshin cameo was, again, it's really funny. It is pretty much exactly what we saw in the trailers. Like, there's not much more than that. But again, I think it is a cute little moment that doesn't really drag down the film too much. And the after credits scene with Corey and Balloon Boy, again, is a very cute touch. Now, I do remember hearing that the original plan was to also have a Markiplier cameo at the very beginning in the cold open, and basically due to the filming for Iron Lung, Mark was unable to make it into the film, which is a shame. I do hope that this movie is going to do well enough to get a sequel, and if so, I think we all are really hoping that Mark is going to be able to get his cameo, because I feel like the Markiplier cameo is basically the only thing holding this back from feeling like a 100% just love letter to the fans. And on that note of it being a love letter to the fans, when the movie ends and you hear the first note of the Living Tombstones Five Nights at Freddy's song come on, Oh man, it brings back so many memories. Just being in college when that song first came out. You know, it literally, it was that Ratatouille push-pull moment of just instantly going back to that time in my life. And it's kind of funny because in the years since, I definitely went through a phase of just disavowing all of it. And especially I was like, oh god, this song is so cringe, you know. And I've sort of come around again on it lately, because honestly, like, say what you will about, you know, whether or not a song about Five Nights at Freddy's is cringe or not, the Living Tombstone is a hell of a musician, and the song slaps hard as hell. And given that this was one of the first major fan works, I would say, to ever come out of the original game, I think it is a beautiful tribute to the people who made Five Nights at Freddy's successful to include that as part of the film. Absolutely love that. So moving on to my thoughts about the actual film itself, I'm going to start off by talking about Josh Hutcherson as our main character, Mike Schmidt. I thought he did pretty well in the role. I think his sort of tired frustration as being this older brother having to raise his little sister all by himself while carrying all this guilt on his back, just and somebody who's struggling to make ends meet, I think he sells the entire thing beautifully. I think, obviously, like most millennials, I look at Josh Hutcherson and I see a lot of his earlier works, and I find it a little hard to see him as like a more serious grown-up character. But I think he was able to completely get past that. I feel like he brings the character of Mike to life in a way that is believable and is somebody that I could get behind. I could get into his story. And I watching the film for the first time, I wasn't too sure how I felt about his motivation of always trying to go back to that dream, to relive that moment with his brother. But after having more time to sort of ruminate on it and stew on it, I think it does work for me. I think it is honestly legitimately heartbreaking to know that he just is unable to let go of that moment. And I mean, I don't think he should be expected to let go. I mean, that is a horrible thing for him to, you know, have lost that little brother at the young age and very obviously blame himself for it happening, and to watch him night after night try desperately to go into this deepest moment of his mind and relive probably the worst moment of his life to try and just desperately get anything out of it that might help bring him closure. It does hurt to think about, and I think that, again, Josh Hutcherson sells it extremely well. Also on that note, the fact that he has the book that is just titled Dream Theory is obviously a very cute nod to one of the earliest discussions in the fandom around the first game. Whether or not, you know, what we're experiencing is a dream or reality in terms of the game. I thought it's a little too obvious to be anything other than a nod to the fandom as part of the movie, and again, completely non-intrusive because it does tie in with his character. So next, I want to talk about something I noticed during the opening credits of the movie, when you do see that pixel art of the original gang of kids, and you see Michael Afton in the bunny suit, just one by one leading them away and dispatching these kids. I thought to myself, you know, this is the moment where a lot of parents across the country are having this realization of, wait, is this what my children have been playing? Is this what they're into? Like, this is what they've been playing on their iPad? And to go on a little bit of a tangent here, I've always found it kind of funny that Five Nights at Freddy's has this reputation of being this thing for kids, because it became popular with kids. And I think there is a distinction that needs to be drawn there, and whether or not you would argue that it is now, as of the games like Security Breach, is another discussion entirely. But from the earliest days, like, it is a horror game. Like, I think a lot of people look at the whole idea of like, oh, well, they're silly animatronic animals and they just jump scare you, and it's like, well, yeah, but even from the earliest days, they were animatronics because of that fear that some people had, the uncanny valley of the unnaturalness of animatronics. Like, it was never about making a kid-friendly game. That was not the vibe I got from it. And I do remember during the early days of playing FNAF 1, going to visit a friend, and his little brother, who had to be like in elementary school, was playing FNAF on his phone. The iPhone version had like just released. And I remember looking at this friend and being like, really? FNAF? Like, he's into that? And I mean, apparently that was just a precursor of what was to come, because obviously the spoiler that everybody knows is that FNAF is super popular with children, and, you know, I don't think I would argue with the fact that in the in the years since, it has very obviously started catering to that fan base. You can go to the toy aisle of any, like, Walmart or Target in America, and you're going to see a bunch of FNAF toys. But the idea that FNAF is for children, I think, has always been a kind of reductive take that is misunderstanding the situation. I don't think that this is necessarily a kids franchise, and I don't think that's me as an adult trying to justify how the thing I like is totally not for kids. Like, believe me, I like plenty of things that are for kids. One of the oldest videos on my channel is a video about Bakugan, a game that was made for 6-year-olds. But I mean, to speak about the darkness of FNAF, I mean, that's another thing that this film is not afraid to get dark when it needs to, and I think it does a great job of balancing that darkness with the silliness that is inherent to it. And when I say the darkness, I think moments like when we see the babysitter, I think her name was Max, when she is being led to Freddy, and you literally see her get bitten in half. You see her torso drop to the floor, like, again, like, when I say this, it sounds like I'm desperately trying to justify, oh no, the thing I like is totally edgy and dark, but I mean, not so much that as, like, I don't think something that was explicitly made for children is going to be as willing to get dark like that. And less on a gory note, but more just talking about the darkness of this movie, like this moment towards the end when you see Chica leading Abby to the Springlock suit is genuinely disturbing. Like, you have that moment where Abby starts to realize what's going on, and you see Chica, like, picking her up against her will and trying to force this little girl into this torture device that is going to kill her. Like, it's a hard watch, like, show for children or otherwise, and I think the movie does a great job of selling that darkness. But moving on to other thoughts about the movie, the next thing I want to touch on is Michael Afton, and I'm only going to touch on this briefly because of the bulk of my thoughts on him are going to be discussed during my coverage of the ending of the movie. But I do want to say just off the bat, like, I think that Afton being this sort of career counselor helping desperate people find employment is the absolute just perfect job for him. This man who has this desire for power and control. And I think somebody on Twitter pointed out, and I'll throw the screenshot on screen here, that he has a participation award hanging in the back of his office. And if that is not the most William Afton thing that you could possibly do, then I don't know what is. I think that is absolutely hilarious. And I think the framing of when we see Mike going to Freddy's on the first night, and you literally have Afton calling him being the phone guy on the first night, I think, again, that is an absolutely, like, hilarious and fitting way of tying the original game to the film. And to talk about going to Freddy's on that first night and the location, I mean, Freddy's feels like a real place in this. It is incredible to see. Like, it literally looks like a place that you could walk into. And again, that Matt Pat video talking about the behind the scenes, that's because they built a real place. Like, it's not just a closed stage or a set or anything like that. They built an entire, like, fake Freddy's restaurant, and I think it was so worth the investment. Like, the sets on this the sets in this film are incredible. And I applaud the hell out of the filmmakers and the set designers for putting in the effort to make Freddy's a real place. I think their work paid off in spades. And funnily enough, on the topic of Freddy's as a location, I think it was very smart of them to not include the powered doors in the security office, which I think for a lot of people is the most common criticism I get, or one of the most common criticisms you hear about the games is, oh, well, that door system makes no sense. And it's like, well, yeah, in the games it makes no sense, one, because, it was based off of a nightmare scenario where you literally can't move, and two, it's a video game. We had to have video gamey elements. And I think trying to preserve that element of the video game would have only been to the detriment of the film, so I think it was a very smart idea to just not include them at all. And continuing to talk about Freddy's, I think the animatronics, oh my god, it doesn't, what could I say? The Jim Henson Creature Shop absolutely nailed the animatronics. There's specifically one shot from the film I keep thinking of, where you can see them from behind, and you see these seams where the fake fur on the robots are sewn together, and that is such a nice touch. It would have been so easy to just make these look like, really good animatronics, but those little touches that makes them feel like something you really would see in, like, this rundown pizzeria in a small town, like, it's perfect. And I want to talk specifically about Chica, because holy shit, dude. Chica is in this film, is the perfect encapsulation of that uncanny valley feeling that people get from animatronics. When you see her in this film, it is deeply uncomfortable, more so than any other member of the cast. Like, that 1,000-yard stare, it does so much. And I do think that for a lot of people that the animatronics are just not going to work. Like, I'm actually not one of those people who have really had that fear of animatronics or experienced that uncanny, fear. But for me, Chica specifically sold me. I look at that and I say, okay, yes, I understand why this is terrifying for people. And to talk about the animatronics themselves as characters, I think the film did a great job at understanding the source material, in that these are animatronics that are possessed by murdered children. I think you really do get the vibe from them that these are the spirits of scared, confused, angry children who were cut down in the prime of their life. I do think that there's going to be a lot of people who are really upset with the second act of this film, where you do have these moments of just Abby hanging out with the robots. But again, for me, it absolutely works. Like, these are these scared, confused children who have finally met another child and are just enjoying the childhood that they never got to have. And as for the child actors themselves, obviously, there's not a lot of, line reads for the actual kids, but the one blonde child, I guess you would probably say that he's supposed to be Cassidy Golden Freddy. I think that he does a pretty good job. Obviously, a lot of people are never going to be happy with the performance of child actors, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who look at that like, oh, silly Aunt whatever her name is line, and be like, oh god. But I mean, honestly, it doesn't take me out of it. I thought that all of the kids did a decent enough job, and the actress who played Abby, I mean, she did a great job as well. I totally believed her in her role. I didn't think that she had that child acting problem. I think everybody played their roles pretty well. Now, the last thing I do want to touch on is the final showdown that we get towards the end of the movie, once everything comes to a head and we finally get to see Matthew Lillard as William Afton in his full Spring Bonnie regalia. Again, I think for a lot of normies watching this movie, this is probably going to be the breaking point, because I do have this curse when I'm watching things that I enjoy, that I always take a moment and I think, oh man, this is going to be the thing that people who don't like this thing are going to rail on. And as soon as you do see him come into frame, I had that moment of like, I love this. People are going to hate this. But for what it's worth, I think that he honestly does cut a very intimidating presence. I think, when he walks in with that bunny suit and the knife in hand, it is a really good horror movie moment where you see this guy and it's like, oh, this is an insane man in a bunny suit, and I am probably about to get killed by a man in a bunny suit. And I do love that when you see him pull out that knife, and he does the ghost face blood wipe from Scream. And maybe I'll make a video on it one day, but I have this crackpot theory that in my own personal headcanon, William Afton is Stu Macher after surviving the events of the first Scream movie. And those of you who are familiar with the Scream franchise, there is a popular fan theory that Stu did survive getting that TV dropped on him. So I am now a full believer in that theory, and I believe he has since moved to Hurricane, Utah, and become a pizza restaurant owner. But that is neither here nor there. I love the final showdown. I think that it works great. I think there is a lot of tension in those moments. I know that the running theme of pictures being how the children communicate with the spirits, and just children in general and people communicate, I think that that's probably a pretty divisive thing, but for me, it does work. I think it is a good enough way. I think it's a great shorthand for how manipulative Afton is in, all the different forms of canon for this franchise. I think it's a great way to cut right to the point of being like, hey, he's basically in control of how these spirits feel, but this is your way of cutting through the mist. I think that works really well. I think that having the cupcake just fly at him and set off those spring locks it is equal parts hilarious and cathartic. For me, it absolutely works. I love the cupcake. I think it is so campy, so ridiculous, in the absolute best of ways. And the moment when the spring locks get set off and we get to see, Springtrap dying, when we get to see Afton dying and leaving in the state where he will eventually become Springtrap, I think Matthew Lillard does a great job of selling that. It is, what little we see is pretty horrifying to imagine. Like, we see the couple of spring locks going in and how deep they go in, and I think leaving the rest to your imagination is really effective. I think Matthew Lillard absolutely sells the agony of getting spring locked, and after he gets carried off and we see that final moment of him being locked in that hidden room, which is obviously calling back to Five Nights at Freddy's 2, I think he does a great job of selling those agonized twitches. Personally, I don't love his reading of the "I always come back" line, but I mean, I think the original voice actor from the Five Nights at Freddy's games just set the bar way too high, so maybe that's my own personal bias. But I mean, other than that, like, I loved everything else about his performance. I thought that Matthew Lillard did a great job, and I do think that hinting at Vanessa's role as Vanny, but not actually making it a factor in this film, was a smart call. Obviously I haven't touched on Vanessa at all. I don't really have a lot to say about her. I thought that her role in the movie was fine. I think for a lot of people it's obviously going to be a point of division again, but for what it's worth, I thought it was a fine part of the movie. And overall, I think that's more or less everything I have to say. Like, at the end of the day, I thought that the Five Nights at Freddy's movie was a lot of fun. Do I think that it is a movie that everyone is going to enjoy? No. Do I think it's going to be the thing that sells people who hated Five Nights at Freddy's on Five Nights at Freddy's? No. But it was never meant to be that. I think it was a film that was intended for the fans. The creators have said as much. And as a fan, I'm pleased. And I've got anecdotal evidence from a couple of friends of mine who said that they weren't into Five Nights at Freddy's and still enjoyed the film. So who knows? I guess, like everything else in this world, it comes down to personal taste. But for what it's worth, I loved the movie. I thought it was a great time. I really hope that we're going to get a sequel, because I would love to see another film set in this universe. I would love to see some of the later animatronics in real life. But with that, that is all I have had to say. I have taken up enough of your time as it is. So, this has been a powerfully pointless video, but I hope you enjoyed it anyways. Bye. Okay, 2 videos in 2 weeks. That is the most consistently I have ever uploaded. As I record this, it is 1 day before Halloween. I am recording this before going out of town to meet up with my family for Halloween, and so hopefully work on this when I get back, and it should be uploaded within the next week. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, as I said last time, I'm really going to try and make it work this time with just these videos with it are not going to be highly edited. I'm just going to come to you every couple of weeks and just talk about something that's on my mind. And right now, Freddy's was on my mind. I have been waiting a long time for this movie, and I think obviously a lot of people aren't pleased with it. The Rotten Tomatoes scores are pretty indicative of that. But, you know, I meant everything I said. I enjoyed it. I had fun. And fuck everything else. Like, at the end of the day, man, you shouldn't care what people think about the things you like. Just like what you like, as much as you like. I'll catch you later.